Welcome to Pesto Comics Audio Edition, and video if you're watching on Substack or YouTube. This is the entry for February 12th, 2024. Post-Mortem, Naked Kaiju Woman, an in-depth look at the 6th Pesto Comics campaign. Welcome back. I've been looking forward to doing this Post-Mortem since the first day that Naked Kaiju Woman launched. You'll understand why when we get into the first slide. It was an unreal campaign. It's led to a whole bunch of new relationships and opportunities that haven't been open to me before. I've been relatively successful on Kickstarter before, but this was a whole new level. The most important thing will be to learn the right lessons from this whole exercise, and if I do, I can carry them forward to my other projects. Fortunately, there's a lot of room for reflection and learning, and I think it's going to be a lot for you, dear viewer or listener, to take for your campaigns if you're curious for yourself. Given that this is going to be a really long post, I won't get into all the stuff that's going on, with one big exception. From Parts Unknown number 2 launches next week. The pre-launch page for From Parts Unknown 2 is live and collecting followers. We're just 1 week away from launch on February 19th, so it's really important to collect those followers and get a big launch. As I mentioned last week, if you're not interested in actually reading a comic about pro wrestling vampires, I totally understand, but giving the campaign a follow does help it in the algorithm and get it out in front of people that might be interested. It won't cost you anything but your time and a click. I truly appreciate if you can do that. Follow From Parts Unknown 2 on Kickstarter. Now, let's get into it. Post-Mortem introduction. For those of you who haven't been here for a Kickstarter Post-Mortem before, it's a review of all the data and numbers that I was able to collect in running the campaign for Naked Kaiju Woman. We'll go through the financials, backer counts, marketing, and a small Q&A at the end to get a general sentiment of how it all went down. Spoilers, the vibes, and the numbers were absolutely off the charts this time. A reminder that I did not create the structure for the Post-Mortem myself. I've co-opted this concept from Comics Launch by Tyler James, adding and removing pieces to make it my own. If you're really looking to get the most out of your Kickstarter campaigns, I always recommend checking out Comics Launch for yourself. It's a great program with a great community behind it. And with that, let's start talking some numbers. Funding. Funds raised comparison. A common trend you're going to see with these charts is that the numbers that Naked Kaiju Woman brought in completely breaks the charts. It outperforms so much that it makes every other campaign look flat, even being the second shortest campaign of the bunch. From the first day, Naked Kaiju Woman was already beating the total funding for 3 out of the 5 previous Pesto Comics campaigns. On the second day, it surpassed the best performing Pesto Comics campaign, Big Smoke Pulp. There was nowhere to go but up. What was even more astounding was that the trend continued day after day. It was such a high pace that the funding gap between $5,000 and $10,000 was at a higher pace than my full campaigns for every other project. It just became a snowball rolling in on itself. Total dollars per campaign. The trend is clear on the total dollars per campaign slide. When you just compare the totals, Naked Kaiju Woman absolutely towers over all of them. Crazy Latte Thing Called Love and Big Smoke Pulp were relatively comparable in what they brought in, with the latter just barely setting a new record. Naked Kaiju Woman, by contrast, has more revenue than all of the previous Pesto Comics campaigns combined. Average pledged. That said, Naked Kaiju Woman didn't dominate in every category. Big Smoke Pulp still holds the highest per backer average of all, though Naked Kaiju Woman is no slouch in being second place. For Big Smoke Pulp, the difference was backers pledging for the Kickstarter exclusive hardcover that was printed on a per-order basis. That exclusivity led to a higher per-backer count. Naked Kaiju Woman also had an exclusive element in the Make 100 enamel pins. They were extremely popular, selling out as an add-on, but with such a low price tag, they didn't contribute to raising this average in the same way. So what did? The Pesto Comics backlist. This was one of the most exciting parts of all the new backers. Finding that many were interested in the whole catalog and not just Naked Kaiju Woman alone was a real treat. Popular pledge levels. Even so, the main book for Naked Kaiju Woman was the true star of the show. An interesting trend here is that the most popular pledge levels and the highest funding pledge levels do a reverse of one another. Although a lot of people did go to the backlist and did add backlist titles as add-ons, the main feature was the various covers of Naked Kaiju Woman, the main cover, or the digital copy. Amongst late pledges, the most popular thing was the all-covered bundle, which was even more surprising given they didn't back during the campaign and were willing to pay that extra fee to get this bundle while it was still available. Although I always have back issues available, they're always priced the best during the campaign when they're launched. If you're looking to get all of the variant covers of a specific title, your best bet is to catch it while it's live on Kickstarter. Funding stats. One of the most surreal things was that the average pledge per day remained high from beginning to end, with the exception of one negative day with a couple of cancellations. I could reliably look at my email every hour and see a new backer finding the campaign. For the first time in any Pesto Comics campaign, I wasn't eagerly checking and hoping, and instead enjoying the experience. Overall budget covered by the Kickstarter campaign. If you look at the stats of how much was covered within each campaign, you can see exactly why I felt this way. Naked Kaiju Woman actually covered its own costs from end to end. It allows me to print a whole bunch of extra copies that I can include on future campaigns and bring to shows, hopefully bringing this whole endeavor into a small profit, which will help recover the losses on the previous campaigns. It has been trending upwards, with each campaign funding more than the one before it, but this is the first time that it's carried its own weight without a doubt. The new goal going forward is going to be not just to break even as we did here, but to surpass that marker so I can start funding even more experimental and different work. Cost split. It's always a difficult balance to keep the costs low while still paying the artists that I work with appropriately, making sure that shipping is done in a way that you don't get damaged packages, and to get a little bit of advertising in where I can. Raphael and JP were worth every penny. The comments we received on the campaign weren't just about the concept, but how awesome the art looks. That doesn't happen without getting top-class talent working on your campaign, which I was lucky enough to do here. There's still some opportunity for this pie to change, as printing and shipping are estimates based on previous campaigns. Arguably, shipping can go up while printing can still come down. I'll be working with the printer that I had on from Parts Unknown, and given that I'll be putting in a much larger order with Naked Kaiju Woman, I may be able to bring those costs down per issue. Shipping, with all the turmoil south of the border and these books being shipped and produced in Canada, has some potential to be chaotic. Fingers crossed, it's all just bluster. Now let's talk backers. Backer count comparison. Not unlike the funding totals, the backer count for Naked Kaiju Woman also started with a huge number. It surpassed not only every day one count, but the total final backer count for Limited Udo. Within 3 days, Naked Kaiju Woman was just a couple backers behind Crazy Latte Thing Called Love. Though not every day was in the double digits, as you can see from the little bit of slowdown in the dead zone area, which feels like a misnomer this campaign. The count ramps up by the end with a really high follower count. Those followers got notified that the campaign was ending and really jumped on board. Backer counts. What was most exciting of all was the amount of new backers to Pesto Comics. With many backers grabbing the backlist, it made sense that they would be new to us. That said, the amount of returning backers was also the most I had ever seen in a campaign. Returning backers from previous campaigns. This is something that I'm tracking using Kickstarter's advanced analytics. Crazy Latte Thing Called Love was hands down the most popular Pesto Comics campaign backer-wise before Naked Kaiju Woman, so it's unsurprising that they would be the majority of the backers returning. Nearly a quarter of them had. Although the actual counts of backers may be lower for every other campaign, the return rate is relatively consistent. The campaign that I'm most surprised and pleased about is the returning backers for Big Smoke Pulp. This was an entirely different campaign, being a book of short stories rather than comics. Seeing this group coming back to support comics means a ton. Multi-return. It's said to become successful in any creative endeavor, you need to build 1,000 true fans. Fortunately, the Kickstarter Advanced Analytics makes it pretty easy to track. Seeing how many backers continually return gives you a good sense of whether you're headed there or not. I've clearly got a ways to go, but it's trending in the right direction. With 6 more campaigns planned this year, this chart will double in size, and hopefully, the amount of backers that are carrying over from campaign to campaign stays relatively consistent. To those 5 that have been here since Unlimited Udo, I know who you are. I always appreciate when your name pops up. And to those of you that found Pesto Comics later, there's nothing wrong with that. I do appreciate you carrying on from campaign to campaign. I believe that this will also grow as Naked Kaiju Woman and From Parts Unknown are series, and one would suspect that backers would return to see those stories through. This was one small disadvantage of doing one-shots exclusively to start. Digital versus physical. I'm a super backer on Kickstarter, nearly reaching 1,000 campaigns backed. An overwhelming majority, I would say 95% of what I've backed, is a digital copy. As much as I love having physical copies of books and having beautiful trades to go on my shelf, I don't have the space to keep all of it. Not to mention that shipping to Canada is extremely prohibitive depending on where the comic is coming from. However, the one mantra I always repeat is, you are not your own customer. Having a large amount of physical items increases the revenue, but are just barely profitable. I try to pass on any savings I may receive. Right now, the goal is just to get the books to as many individuals as humanly possible. Plus, I enjoy the process of fulfillment. I'll share how all that goes in the follow-up post on March 26th. Backer types. Though the digital copies being sent out always outweigh the physical ones, that's mostly thanks to bundles. Digital copies are a part of the packages when a backer orders a physical copy, so it's not always a clear metric. A better view is to look at the tier type and whether it's primarily digital or a physical one. The trend was usually that digital backers still hold the majority over physical, but that changed with Big Smoke Pulp and continued with Naked Kaiju Women. Before those two campaigns, it was consistently 40% physical and 60% digital. Those numbers have completely flipped, so we'll be sending out a lot more packages this time out. Where are physical backers from? There is one clear outlier, with backers from the United States. That's on trend with every Pesto Comics campaign. Fortunately, we have really good shipping services here in Canada, specifically with getting things over the border to the United States. I'm usually able to ship to the US for less than anywhere else, including on my side of the border in Canada. It did make all the tariff talk and the removal of exemptions for small packages a little bit terrifying. 301 backers would suddenly be hit with a nominal fee. Fortunately, that seems to have subsided, for now at least. When we look at the rest, Canada and the UK stay in their usual order. Australia has really bumped up their numbers, plus a couple from New Zealand. New to the list is Singapore. Although I've shipped to Ireland, Italy, Netherlands, and Germany before, there's a whole host of new countries all over Europe that'll be getting their copies of Naked Kaiju Woman. Fulfillment will be a lot of fun. And one more time, come back on March 26th for that story. Backer profiles. I've been touting how this whole campaign was built for Kickstarter, but what does that mean exactly? I'm referring to the power backers on Kickstarter. Usually they're good for about 50% of the total backer counts, but in this case, they got an overwhelming 76%. Given how many were brand new to Pesto Comics, I believe I've hit the right note. First-time backers are always really exciting, knowing that I've pulled someone from outside the Kickstarter ecosystem and got them interested. The same could be argued for passive, casual, and core backers who are more selective with what they put their money towards. These are the hard-earned groups that really give you a sense that advertising, word of mouth, and a well-built campaign are working. Backer platform. Kickstarter stays completely on trend, as the desktop website is still by far the most popular way for people to back the campaign. That said, just under half are using some kind of mobile device. When I build my story pages for campaigns, I keep this in mind. It seems to be paying off. There are a lot of strange behaviors, like how rewards are displayed on mobile, so keeping everything easy to read and follow on mobile is a must. Marketing. Followers. Followers are always an interesting challenge. They are the ones firmly on the fence. There's little risk in backing early, as payment doesn't go through until the campaign ends. So when they follow without backing, I take it to mean that I haven't done quite enough to win them over. I find that most of my advertising effort seems to pay off in just collecting followers. The problem with these followers is that I don't know who they are. They're simply a number. And in the case of Naked Kaiju Woman, it was a very large number. There were just about 48 fewer followers than my previous 5 campaigns combined. That's a lot of folks that showed some interest, but just didn't hit that pledge button for whatever reason. That said, the conversion rate stayed more or less the same. It's usually between 25 and 30%. Given that the absolute number of followers was so much bigger than usual, it led to a huge surge in the last 48 hours as those followers received a notification on their app or in their email that the campaign is ending and now is the time to heed the call. Kickstarter referrals. This slide might be the most important one in this post-mortem. The Kickstarter referral system is what built this campaign into the monster that it was. Naked Kaiju Woman was fortunate enough to get the Project We Love badge within a couple hours of launching. Through that, it ended up on the homepage and in Discovery. I was seeing it in project update emails from other creators that I've backed more often than I have in any of my previous campaigns. I've broken it up into 3 categories, though you can see that there's a subset of each one in the tables on the right-hand side. It's effectively Discovery, emails and pushes, and recommended pages. Between those mechanisms, this campaign was a roaring success. Non-Kickstarter referrals. That's not to discount referrals from outside the Kickstarter ecosystem. The direct URL category doesn't really give you a sense of exactly where people are getting your campaign. All you know is that they've punched the URL into their browser, and my guess is folks like Naked Kaiju Woman Colorist, JP Jordan, and other kind people who added it to their newsletters or posted on social media about it bumped this number up. In a lot of those cases, they were just providing a direct link, so I can assume that a portion of the 66 backers here were referred by them. These referrals can all be considered word-of-mouth referrals. But the main lesson that I'm taking from this, although Blue Sky is growing, there is less and less value in pushing things on social media specifically. You'll find a lot more success working within the Kickstarter system than you will anywhere else. BackerKit Launch is super handy in being able to collect all of your previous backers and pester them via email. I try not to overdo it, as I find there's diminishing returns, and you also get a few unsubscribes if you get too unruly with sending multiple emails out. I stick to one at pre-launch, one at launch, and then one just before the campaign ends, in between the ones sent by Kickstarter to the unknown followers. None of these numbers are going to impress anyone who hasn't sent an email campaign before. Click rates and open rates are typically very low with any email advertising. This is a mild improvement from my last campaign. The negative number in the percentage of total funded is a little misleading, as the much higher backer count made those percentages harder to come by. Reflecting on the campaign, how do you feel now that the campaign is over? Unsurprisingly, I feel absolutely great. I still can't believe how well this campaign did. Even better than that, it really does feel like folks were more interested in the concept itself, and not just the naked ladies. At least, that's what they were telling me directly, virtually or otherwise. I'm really excited to get these books in everyone's hands, and in my own. Fulfillment is going to be a real challenge, but I think it'll be a ton of fun too. What was the best part, or high point? Those first 48 hours were absolutely mind-blowing. I did think the campaign would do well before I launched. I kept mentioning that this was built for Kickstarter, and I thought it might have a chance to be the best one by Pesto Comics yet. Truthfully, I always think that. In my wildest dreams, I thought at best it would do a third or two-thirds better than my last campaign, and the fact that it has done 5 times that is absolutely surreal. Even more surprising is that there wasn't much that I had put into it for folks to find it. That's not discounting how much everyone else was pushing the campaign on my behalf. It was really humbling seeing folks that thought it was a cool idea and really wanted to get behind it. What was the worst part or low point? There was one day with a couple higher pledge cancellations. Specifically, the highest pledge level, that was $170 Canadian. Even with the backers that were getting single issues or digital copies throughout the day, it led to a negative day. The only one of the whole campaign. Even then, I wasn't sweating it. That usually happens with every campaign. It's rare to see 0 cancellations. It's just part of the game, but this was one of the very few low points to this amazing campaign. It was more than recovered the following day, so it's very hard to get too upset about it. How are you different now that this campaign is over? If you've been following the Substack over the past few months, you know how I've been contemplating what the strategy going forward is going to be. I've taken on a lot of the risk myself, and with how flat growth in the campaigns had been, I was getting a little worried that I may have plateaued. This campaign completely shattered that. It gives me a renewed confidence that I'm doing the right thing, and it gives me even more motivation to really put my foot on the gas like I had been planning all along. We have so many new campaigns and new projects that are just waiting to be released at this point, and I can't wait to get them out there. It reminds me that setbacks are just that. It doesn't mean that you have to stop entirely. It just means that you have to learn from them and go forward. What surprised you most about this campaign? It's how the campaign was pretty much running itself. Normally, I have a bunch of things on social media really pushing, hey, we need 1 more backer, we need 2 more backers, or I have a bunch of stretch goals planned. I've tried pocket rewards. I've tried everything to try and get the campaign going faster and higher. This needed none of that. It was a self-sufficient campaign that seemed to promote itself. People were finding it all over the place on Kickstarter, and it shows in the new backer count. The fact that there's people from countries all over the world that are seeing this, folks that I would never advertise to, shows the power of the platform. What's your biggest concern now that the campaign is over? The easy answer would be fulfillment. It's more than I have ever done before, but given that this is now my 6th campaign, I'm not worried about it at all. I have systems in place. I know exactly what I need to do and how. So I'm really not worried about getting this all together. I'm actually excited about it more than anything. The true concern I have is the exact same one I had after Crazy Latte Thing Called Love. I'm really good at looking a gift horse in the mouth, and I'm worried about how I'm going to repeat this in the future. The easy answer would be to just do a sequel. But I've structured the year ahead in a way that it's going to be a few months before the next issue of Naked Kaiju Woman is available. The good news is that it's set up to come up this year. So it's not going to be too long of a wait, but in an ideal world, I'd have the next issue up next. If I'm being completely honest though, I'm just stretching for negatives at this point. I'm happy with how it's all gone. What worked really well? There's nothing like having a title that's super clear to sell a book like Naked Kaiju Woman. It says it all. I've got more compliments for that than I did for the actual content of the book. Just a reminder to keep it simple. Can you do it again? Absolutely. As much as I love titles like Crazy Latte Thing Called Love, or an insider reference like From Parts Unknown, I think speaking plainly and telling people what they're getting might be the new way to go about titling my books, or at least the campaign behind the books. What did backers really seem to resonate with? I took the Make 100 initiative as a challenge to do something different than I have before. When I went to San Diego Comic-Con last year, I actually collected a bunch of pins unintentionally. A lot of places were giving them out, including DC, IDW, and Dark Horse booths, so I had a bunch of pins floating around. I needed a place to put them as I didn't think I'd enjoy them as much as I do. Now, I have a little collection going, and I thought maybe it's time for me to add to them with some Pesto Comics pins. They've technically sold out, since they're supposed to be limited to 100 backers, but there was a little bit of a hack as you can get the pin either via the grab bag or by adding it to your package as an add-on, which was also limited to 100, so we sold over 100 total. They were so popular, I'll definitely be doing this going forward from now on. What completely bombed? Not to sound like a jerk about it, but nothing. Everything went so well with this campaign that I can't point to one single thing that underperformed or didn't do as expected. It went extremely, extremely well. What will you never do again? I won't say that I'll never do it again, but one thing I'm definitely going to prioritize a lot less is social media. The return on investment seems to reduce with every campaign that I put out there, especially nowadays where it just feels like I'm talking to the same handful of people over and over. I'd rather take that energy and put it into tools like Substack or just getting more campaigns out into the world. Lessons learned. I mentioned earlier how over the past few months, I've been letting it slip that I was feeling a lot less confident about this whole foray into comics. I know that you have to stick to your guns and you really have to just keep pushing forward regardless of the ups and downs, but when you're in the midst of a down, it's really hard to keep that smile on your face. I'm not naive. I know that a lot of this was timing and luck. Part of it was being on trend. It's not as though everyone is suddenly going to buy everything I put out and I'll be able to quit my day job, but knowing that I can garner the support when I need to keep these projects going means the world. The main lesson I learned is to be where luck can find you. I was fortunate that I did it this time, and truthfully, when I say luck, I mean you. Thank you for your support. Thank you for reading or listening to the newsletters, sharing the social media posts, and backing books when you can. It means a lot, and it keeps me going week after week. I have so much more planned, and I can't wait to share it all with you. If there's anything that I didn't cover that you were hoping that I would, let me know in the comments. And that's it for this week. Thank you very much, and I'll talk to you soon. Coming up on the Substack, next week, February 19th, Round 2 from Parts Unknown, Stepping Back in the Ring with Bruno and Pietro. And February 26th, Fun with Fulfillment, Big Smoke Pulp, Part 2 of the Big Smoke Pulp Post-Mortem. And March 5th, Schedule Congestion, having so much to release and not enough weeks to do it. And upcoming appearances. Nothing's really changed here. I'm hoping to go to TCAF, and I'm hoping to go to Fan Expo Canada. We'll see if those tables land. And in terms of where I'll be attending, there's Toronto Comic Con, there's the Toronto Indie Authors Conference, and of course, New York Comic Con. We'll see how all those go. I haven't gotten tickets to New York Comic Con yet, so that one's still iffy. But the rest, I do have my tickets. I'll be going there. I'll see you there if you're around. And what's happening on the Instant Ink Comic Book Podcast this week? This week, we have the second half of our conversation with PJ Curling. It's a lot of fun. We do learn a lot about him and his motivations and all the things that come with that, so definitely worth checking out. And with that, I just want to thank you. It's been a really long post, so I won't keep you too much longer, but I just want to say, once again, thank you very much for supporting if you have, in whatever way you have, whether you backed it or if you just, provided your support in some form or other. I really do appreciate you. And next week, we start it all over again with From Parts Unknown. So if you haven't checked out that campaign and followed the pre-launch, please do so. And next week, I'm going to sell you all on it once again. So I really do appreciate your time. We'll talk then.